To order. We'll start as normal with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. John Morgan has a conflict and won't be with us tonight. We will start as usual by reviewing and approving our payroll and accounts payable. For the period ending 1/11/2025, we had payroll in the amount of $31,298.96. We had accounts payable in the amount of $36,865.08. We also had our second payment of the month to Swayze of $245,000. Did everyone see the consent agenda?
Yes.
It's under there.
Want it?
We'll do that next. Did you take a look at it?
Yep.
Yeah, oh, perfect. Perfect. And the non-public minutes are in the mail folder.
Hmm.
Thank you. You have a question?
I'm gonna cross out Russ's name and put mine.
Oh, is it an old one?
Yeah.
Must have got pulled off the wrong file.
Oh, yeah.
All set? Yep. All right. Next, I will take a motion to review and approve the consent agenda.
Moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments about the consent agenda for this week? No, included in this week's consent agenda are the public minutes from 1/7/25, two sets of non-public minutes from 1/7/25, one set of which is sealed, and building permits. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so we'll pass the consent agenda. We will now open public comment at 6:03. If you do choose to use the freestanding mic, just make sure you push the button and you see the green light come on. Otherwise, please use this one and make sure you use your mic. Anyone interested in coming up for public comment? Welcome. Just flick that microphone on for us. Thank you. And don't forget your name and street address.
Yeah, Doug Marino, 26 Mill Pond Road, planning board member. And I just want to provide a quick update from the Rockingham Planning Commission. Doug Finnan, he might be joining a little bit later, but couldn't be here for the beginning. So we did have our meeting last week, and we talked about our some of the priorities around improving like highway safety and the highway improvement safety plan. So over the last several years, the number of fatalities overall have increased. And this is within the Rockingham Planning Commission region, which includes most of Rockingham, but doesn't include Newmarket, and there are a couple other towns that work with the Stratford Planning Commission. But so fatalities overall are up. The number of serious injuries have been increasing in recent years, as well as motorcycle fatalities have also increased over the past several years. So we adopted our highway safety improvement plan targets for the next 10 years. The goal, of course, is to get to 0 fatalities by 2050. It's a very ambitious goal. So we set goals for 2035 that kind of would get us on track to hitting 0 by 2050. And so we adopted those metrics, and I'm happy to send them along to the board if you would like. We have, and I think that Doug Finnan probably provided an update on this at one of the previous meetings. We have made some improvements in terms of 125, specifically like the intersection between South Road and where it intersects with 125. That improvement made its way into the as a top priority in the 10-year transportation plan, so that's really good. in addition to adopting the benchmarks that we want to meet over the next 10 years, we also had sort of like an informal discussion about how to improve highway safety. Part of the problem is that a lot of the fatalities are from people not wearing their seatbelts, which, you know, of course, in New Hampshire, it's legal for adults to not wear their seatbelt. That's a personal choice. But we've discussed the possibility of maybe trying to increase some sort of public awareness around the importance of wearing seatbelts, and also the importance of wearing helmets on motorcycles. That's also a personal choice, but it does lead a lot of the motorcycle fatalities are folks who weren't wearing helmets. So we're kind of, you know, floating some ideas on how to increase that public awareness, but we've also made some progress here in the Brentwood section of 125, and those improvements will be happening over the next 10 years.
Great. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Burlow, Scrabble Road. Last Tuesday, the select board met and discussed encumbrances. Unless there is a contractual obligation, this board is forbidden from accepting, thinking about, doing anything with encumbrances past the end of the fiscal year, which ends December 31st. I'd just like to make this board aware of that. Talking about library, talking about any of the departments that are not contractually obligated in the 2024 fiscal year, is illegal for you to attempt to make encumbrances. Just want to make you aware of that.
We're actually going to speak about that, Jim, when we get to encumbrances tonight, but thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Come in under committee updates?
Sure.
Okay, I'll do
Yep.
that later.
Great. Thanks, Becky.
Liz Faria, South Road. I missed the preamble. Is John coming, not in absentia or going on Zoom?
He's absent tonight.
Excused absence?
Yeah. I excused him. He let me know he had a conflict.
Okay. I wasn't gonna bring this up, but since Doug brought it up, the Rockingham Planning Board, Doug Marino, I'm an alternate to the planning board. He does great work over there. We totally disagree on the South Road on 125 Rotary, whatever they're thinking. I think it's already fixed by what they've done recently with the turning lane, since I live on South Road and I turn often. The big impediment there is no longer the Heavenly Donuts parking lot. It's the lights at, I don't remember which car dealership that is, 125 and South at night. The car dealership shines in your, what is it? Yeah, Lewis. It's Lewis. So we have spoken to him once because we drive out of South Road into it, and then when you come down, it's really hard to see when you're going south on 125 to make that left where the turning lane is, so you don't have a head-on collision.
It's the angle of the light,
It's
right?
yeah, it's the angle, and it's just they're so bright, and now we have glare in the afternoon, evening time. It's just really dangerous, but it's not dangerous because of the road anymore. So I hope I'll be dead before the thing goes in it. And this is the live free or die state, so I absolutely oppose the seatbelts and helmets. I have one adult child that's afraid she's going to get caught in a car. I disagree with her, but she's an adult. And, she's going to get trapped and it's going to be a fire and she can't get it undone, whatever. Nobody needs more anxiety. I just figure if you ride a motorcycle, and we have one, I don't ride it, but we have one, and it's a Harley, which I bought for my husband, and he can't ride anymore, so anyone who wants a really great Harley, we have one. It also changes the gene pool a little bit if you have a fatality because you don't wear your seatbelt or don't wear a helmet. And like I said, it's live free or die state. I had another question I think I asked the other night, which was, I was told by, I think Jen, that if I have a 91A request, so this is a question for Paul and for Andy. If I have a 91A request and I request it in a public hearing or a public meeting that's recorded, does that suffice, Andy, or Paul, no, it has to be in writing. Are you
As I
sure?
told you, it has to be in writing. There's a
Well, I
form.
know, I'm just,
You can get it
there's a
from
lot of
Daphne.
things, some people, yeah. So it doesn't have to be a form either. You can just write.
There is a form that I think is quite easy to use.
Do you have it? I'd love to have the form.
Daphne has it.
What's today? Tuesday? I'll go get it. Thank
Great.
you. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Oh, no, one more, sorry. When the town administrator is supposed to start next Monday,
Yep,
that is a federal holiday.
correct.
How do you start on a federal holiday?
Because we invited her to come in, get settled, set up our office, meet Jillian, get the lay of the land.
So you're gonna work in the federal holiday so that the town office will be open, right?
No, we are doing it as a special procedure for her to start on a holiday. She technically, it's a paid holiday for all employees, so no employees will be here other than those of us who are going to be here to welcome the town administrator. It's a courtesy that we gave her to start on a holiday.
I think it's
Otherwise-
totally inappropriate. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, Liz. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment at 6:12.
I just wanted to respond on the
Sure.
lights.
You're welcome, sir.
South Road, yeah. So I have spoken with that company in the past. and I
It's come
know-
up, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that they had done work to have the lights moved. So I thought that personally, and I live. Yeah.
I think they made one worse and one better. My husband did it too.
Yeah, I live over there. I mean, I thought it was an improvement, frankly, Liz, when they made, the, repair that they did. So,
In the turning lane or the guys at the business? The Lee Auto, what was it?
Lewis, yeah,
Yeah, it's still, you live over there? I thought.
I do.
Oh, you
Yeah.
live over there. Oh, you're on the.
The other side of the tracks, yes.
No, but I mean, when you're coming, if you're coming out of South Road, and you come out a different way than I do, so you don't have that light that's running into South Road. towards
I
exit.
come at it from all different angles because, depending on where I'm coming from or where I'm going.
Between 125 and Fremont?
Let's stop this
Anyways.
conversation.
Yeah.
I think if there's other townspeople that are concerned about that, certainly we could have another conversation with that business.
It's better. It's
Okay.
not good.
Okay. There also is an official complaint form, so if anybody in town wants to fill out anything about that being potentially dangerous, please do so.
Who do we address that to?
You can get that at the assessing office. Jillian has copies of that.
Does it come back to Jillian, select board, or the town administrator?
Depends who it's most appropriate for it to go to. We closed public comment, so we will now move on to our discussion action items. The first order of business on here is to review BudCom budget votes from 1/13, which was last night. I brought to BudCom our amended budget that Selectboard had approved, which included 24 of our budgets that had been modified downwards. Actually, 23 that had gone down and one that had gone up, which was finance. And so I individually presented all 24 of those budgets to BudCom last night, and they approved all of them. There were a few questions, a few comments, a few suggestions, a few thoughts of like, you could have done this, you could have done this. So some constructive conversation, but overall, we did get a pass on every single one of those budgets. So at this point, Select Board and BudCom are in agreement for all of the budgets. We were happy to report and to discuss with BudCom that those 24 changes that we made contributed to a total decrease in the budget of $319,631, which drops our budget down to a budget increase of about 8.39%. And so unless we make any further changes between now and the budget hearing on February 10th, I believe it is, that will be our budget as it stands. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I don't have a question, but can I just say something?
Please.
So in October, we had asked for kind of rough ballpark.
Like a prelim
numbers,
budget.
A prelim budget. That budget was showing somewhere between a 16 to 18% increase, depending on various.
On some guesstimates.
On
that
some
were done.
guesstimates
Yeah.
that were maybe not great. We got it down to 12 and a half after the first run through between select board and budget
Yeah, I
committee.
think our first had been 13.9, the first one.
And then there,
and then
anyway,
we started making some changes.
and then we made more changes and got it down to 8.39.
Yes.
And I just want to say that out loud.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yep, and thank you for your help on all that work.
Yep,
To
that's
help make
not-
those changes. Great. Any other comments or questions from this board about that? Okay. All right, great. So thank you, BudCom, for assisting us. And obviously, BudCom was happy to see us be able to pull in the budget. Next is encumbrance requests. So to Mr. Burlow's comment, there have been some folks asking questions about encumbrance, and I think maybe misinterpreting a little bit what the RSA says about encumbrances. So when you look, I think it's RSA 32.7 that is about encumbrances. The end of the fiscal year is the date by which there has to be a financial obligation for the money, meaning you have to have an invoice, a contract, a quote, some sort of agreement with a vendor or a person that you are going to contract with them for a certain amount of money. And then if that work is not finished, completed, or done during the fiscal year, you can encumber that to be paid in 2025. So the fiscal year cutoff is the cutoff for what they call the obligation, that the money has to be obligated before the end of the fiscal year. Traditionally, we do make those decisions in January, mostly because we're still paying out the December bills at the end of January. So in order to know how much is left in the budget and in certain budgets, we need to wait at least a week or 2 or 3 for all of those budgets to get cleaned up. And so I did look back to last year, and last year we did our encumbrances on 3 different meetings in January, and the last encumbrance that we did was on January 30th. So we are not in violation of the law having the discussion about the encumbrances. One thing that I have an email out to NHMA to check, which I do think is a little bit of a question, is the library encumbrance that we did for salary. I need to check legally with NHMA if salary is considered an obligation, and it's possible that that one we may have to rediscuss. I think all of the other ones that we've done and the ones that we have before us tonight should be well within the law, but I do think that salary one, we want to make sure in the absence of our town administrator that we are following the intent of the law. Do any board members have questions, thoughts, or comments about that topic? Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Andy, that's how you've always understood the intent of the RSA?
Yes.
Great.
I'm reading it as we speak.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, it's a little, when you read it, it leaves a little to interpretation. And so I actually went on NHMA and read some different documents and looked at a PowerPoint about that. And the real importance is that the funds are obligated. You can't just say in January, oh, I meant to buy something, and go out and get an invoice for it and then use last year's money, because that would be using appropriations for the wrong year. But if you obligated the funds in 2024, you can encumber those funds for the next year.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. I'm just waiting for that one little piece of confirmation. And for the library, I think Janice was here. If we find that there's a problem with that encumbrance, we'll let you know, and we'll troubleshoot a different solution for that employee issue, or we'll just find a way to, or we'll adjust your budget, or we'll do something different. So don't distress. Sure, yeah, oh, yeah. That's not, yeah, the issue is just, is a salary considered an obligation? I'm not sure. We have to make sure we're following the intent of the law. Okay. Jim, does that answer your question sufficiently? Yes or no. Okay, well, hopefully, stick with us as we get the rest of it, and if you have further comments, let us know in public comment. So we will now move on to the encumbrance request that we have in front of us today. The first one on here is fire gear. It's actually in the back of your packet. And this is one that we had discussed back in October. We have not received these, the shipment of these yet, but this is the active order acknowledgement form that we have in front of us. The total for this order acknowledgement was $47,883.13. We had already pledged $24,000 of ARPA towards this, which would leave a remainder of $23,883.13 to encumber towards this. And as of today, fire, let me just pull it up for you. Fire has $151,209 underspent in their budget, mostly because of open personnel positions and unspent FICA, Medicare, retirement, etc. So I would open it to discussion or questions about this encumbrance request. Andy?
If I remember this conversation right with the chief, that when we made the decision of using the ARPA funds, it was half from ARPA, half from the budget, so.
Correct,
Technically, had the clothing come in, we've already expended this money.
correct.
So I see that it should go forward into an encumbrance because had the clothing actually come in, the money would have been spent.
Right.
Right. And as I'm reading the statute, it talks about a legally enforceable obligation created by contract or otherwise.
Right, exactly.
You know, black and white in the statute. So this is a,
Pretty straightforward one.
Order that was placed.
Is the reason that we haven't got it yet because of something the town did or didn't?
I don't
do, or-
think so.
Okay,
I don't know.
it's just like a,
I just checked with Joe and he said, yep, that's the order
it's just like
acknowledgement.
a
We just
back
don't have
order
it yet.
or something.
I don't know the exact details of why we don't have them in hand yet.
but it looks like the contract is from October.
Yep.
So.
To
therefore-
Andy's point, if
Yeah.
they had been delivered 3 weeks ago, we would have already paid it out of the
Yeah.
budget.
Right.
Right.
So
Okay.
I think that legally falls within the ambit.
Yep, I do as well. Is anyone interested in making a motion for the 23-88313?
Move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that will pass. Thank you. Next, we have a conservation consultant. And Becky, did you want to come up and speak to that one? And I believe we have, yes, we have a memorandum from Becky in our
Yes, we do.
packet.
I would like to make one adjustment in that memorandum. Rather than 3,100, it was just 3,000 when I recalculated. and
Oh,
did
wait,
what-
maybe we
okay.
don't. Maybe we just have the regional associations.
We just have regional.
Yeah, I think we don't actually have your
Oh.
initial one there, Becky. I had it last week.
Yeah,
That's okay. No, that's fine. We just bumped her a week from last week. I may have it in here.
mhm.
Yes, I do have the original communication from you in here. So if you can just talk the board through
Yes.
what your request is, that'd be great.
Yes, we've been talking for, my name is Becca Dunham, Chair of Conservation. We started negotiating with a consultant to work with conservation on easements and working with landowners. And by the time that, and we originally budgeted, I believe it was $6,400 for her service. We started this in August, feeling that we might get through that funding. But since the contract was not signed till November due to some issues, getting the paperwork done, we only started using her on November 20. So we weren't using the full amount. We do have the signed contract. We are very actively using her with one current process and one that has just come forward. So I foresee that we're going to be using this in '25, her full amount. So I would like to encumber 3,000 for use in 2025.
Okay. And is your thought that you will need that 3,000 in addition to what you have budgeted for her? It's to give you extra hours of hers in
Yes.
25 that you weren't able to use in 24?
Yes, yes.
Okay, because you do have a budget line
I
item
do have a
for
budget
her.
line item
Okay.
for that, yes.
Okay.
But just a quick question, and maybe I
Yep,
didn't
no,
fully understand this. So did she actually perform service?
yes, and there's an invoice that I submitted by the deadline for payment that was $616,000.
How much?
$616,000.
No,
6,000?
Oh, I'm sorry, the contract was 6,400. I thought you were asking about if we used her this year
Yes.
in '24.
And you're saying yes.
Yes, we did. I
And there was an
submitted her payment slips, and it was 616,000, $616.
Ah, that sounds better
Ah.
than
Been a
1,000.
long day. $616 used
gotcha.
from November till the end of December.
Gotcha.
So I guess my question is,
I think this is one of those like,
yeah, I mean, can we encumber where the services haven't actually occurred or only 600 some odd dollars have occurred in 2024?
We have the signed contract, and I thought that was the premise on which encumbrances were determined.
it is, but I think what Paul is saying, as opposed to like fire gear that's just not delivered yet, this is somebody who wasn't able to meet her contract, and so we're like pushing the hours out, but we also
Yeah.
have her budgeted for next year. So I do wonder if this might be in that little wiggle room that we do need to check
I would,
with NHMA.
I would.
The other thing I was thinking of, Becky, because I had thought that this one might be one that's in that gray area,
Yeah,
is we could ask the voters to encumber those funds into your conservation fund. That is one thing that you can do every year with unspent conservation
Okay.
dollars.
didn't know that.
And it would essentially have the same impact in that that money would go into your conservation fund and you could then use conservation dollars to pay your consultant.
Interesting.
And
I
that
didn't
might
know
be
was an option.
cleaner, and that
Yep.
would be the voters deciding that. I mean, it would be a pretty straightforward vote because it's just a few $1,000s. I'm sure the public would be behind you.
Okay.
But that might be one way just to do a cleaner vote at town meeting. It'd be a quick warrant.
I would appreciate if you checked
Yeah,
with New
so
Hampshire Municipal.
Would you be okay if we just check? Because I think
Check,
this is one of
please.
those that feels a little bit less
Yeah.
straightforward.
Yeah.
And the
than-
reason why is because we're really not contractually obligated until she performs the service. And
Right.
if she didn't,
Kind of like the employee thing, like we were gonna pay you, but you didn't do the work yet. So I think that may fall in that little
That's an
gray area.
interesting twist on that. I had not realized that.
Do you see the difference
I
between
see the
like, oh, we
difference.
bought something that's not
Yeah.
delivered yet, or
Yeah.
Wayne bought salt that's not
Yeah.
delivered yet? It just,
Yeah.
it's a little less clear. We don't, and without a town administrator, we just don't want to
Yeah.
violate the law.
Yeah.
We'd like to follow the law if possible.
Okay, here's a twist.
Okay, give us a twist.
Here's a twist. Since we paid the legal fees out of our budget, which diminished that, a good portion of that,
Yep,
we have paid an appraiser out of the conservation fund.
yep.
Can I switch that?
I don't know that you need to, because whatever money you have left in your budget, you can ask the voters to encumber right back into your conservation fund.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
like a dollar's a dollar was a
Okay.
dollar.
Okay,
So if you're okay holding on this until we get some
I will hold
clarity,
that.
hopefully at
Yes.
next meeting.
I will hold
And
that.
if either our new town administrator or NHMA tells us, that's
Okay.
probably not the letter of the law, then I think
that's
your best
interesting.
alternative
Okay.
is just to ask the voters to encumber the entire remainder of your budget back into the conservation fund.
That's a
your other
very
option.
interesting little extra interpretation, I'll say, or reading of the statute. So, thank you. So yes, so if possible, yes, find out for me and just let me know.
And
What-
yes, your number is correct. The 3,300 is what we have, as I have listed as
Yeah.
of today's date as remaining in your budget.
Right.
So if you're willing to bear with us just one more week until we get
Sure.
those sort of i's dotted and t's crossed, we would
Sure.
appreciate that.
Sure.
I try to read these statutes conservatively,
Yeah.
especially when I have sharks out there in the water.
We're trying to do the right thing.
Becky?
Me?
No,
Wow.
no.
We're do,
Okay.
we're trying to follow the law.
Palm
We don't want to
Not
break the
want,
law.
Okay. Okay, whatever works best, I would appreciate that because we
Law.
anticipate with our activity picking up significantly. I'm just concerned what's going to happen in
Yep.
'25.
And then, of course, remember,
Yeah.
you have that entire conservation fund.
Yep.
So if you need to use that consultant more
Yeah.
than you budgeted for, you
Yeah.
have a plan A, B,
Yep.
and C. So you guys will be fine. You'll have your
And
money.
we'll look forward to when that fund is replenished. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so that one we're going to hold on briefly.
The other thing to check on, Jen, was if we have the authority to transfer money out of the budget into the conservation fund to re-establish money that was used.
I
That might
think
need to
that's
be a warrant
what it has
article.
to be a warrant article, I think. I think the town has to vote to encumber that into a fund, as you would. Actually, planning board's going to bring us a warrant that's similar. They're going to use their unencumbered funds into a master plan CRF, so that I think you have to do it as a warrant. But yes, I will double check on that. All right, next is rec drainage. This one is a little more straightforward in that we have a quote from Hillside Landscaping that was done over the summer. This was held off on at the time because there was some work in progress to potentially move forward with the pickleball courts. And the rec wasn't sure that they would have the funds that they needed for this, so they held off a little bit. And so what Andy has asked for is a communication from Hillside Landscaping about doing some drainage next to the parking lot for a cost of $3,990. And then in the far left corner of, I think that's the lower field, to do some erosion and drainage work. If anybody remembers from when Andy talked to us earlier, some of those fields have erosion problems that have decreased the quality of the fields and have caused us to lose some of our contracts with some of our, I think, soccer teams mostly because of the state of the fields. So that second quote was for $3,850. Andy has left in his budget about $6,500. He had quoted me $6,400 that he was looking to encumber.
But was this, and I'm sorry to
No,
cut you off, but was
please.
this merely a quote as opposed to a enforceable obligation?
It's a quote. I think that's the same thing. If we could get into the nitty gritty of it, I think they had intended to do this but held off. So did they sign a contract? I don't think so.
Yeah,
So that's another one that if we want to double check, I mean, obviously we want to do this right.
yeah, and I'm not sure that falls within the,
Yeah, we can check on
Terms.
that. I can let Andy know that. I mean, I think
Do you know
everybody
if-
understands we're trying to do our best here.
yeah.
Do you know if it hadn't been winter, if you would have moved forward with this when the pickleball court was done?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know what the year dependency is. But yeah, that's the one I can check on as well, whether a quote is sufficient or whether you actually need a
Yeah,
like
I
signed
would-
contract.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, perfect.
Okay.
We will double check that one as well. Okay. All right. And then, were there others? Did you get any other requests so far? Bob Stevens had grabbed me in the hallway the other day to say that there was maybe, no, okay. Anyone else on the board have received any encumbrance requests? No, okay, so we will check on those couple and circle back. Oh, the one from Wayne is the other one. I spoke to Wayne today. I don't know if the board wants to actually see the signed, because that is a signed contract because we've been using it for the salt. So the agreement that we had made with Wayne was that in order to facilitate cutting that line in his budget, that we would encumber a certain amount of that salt and sand contract. The total contract was for $155,000. I don't think we need to encumber anywhere near up to that amount.
How
But
much
I-
has he already spent?
That, I don't know. Do you know how much he's already spent out of that?
I could go look.
We can check if we need to. I mean, the delta is big enough that I didn't think it mattered, but I also just wanted us to have a discussion about the couple different ways that we could handle those funds. So we had always talked about it over the last couple months during budget season about encumbering those funds. I think this board should have a discussion, though, similar to what I just had with Becky, about does it make more sense to encumber those funds and then whatever's unspent to just go back to the general fund? Or should we change our tactic a little bit and ask the public to encumber those funds into the winter fund? We had previously talked about, you know what, let's just leave the winter fund alone. It's got like 10 or 11,000 in it and just straight encumber this. But I do think we should maybe discuss the pros and cons of those two different approaches. We could encumber it into that capital reserve fund where it would then stay,
Until
or
we
we
need it.
could encumber it for this bill and then whatever is unspent returns back. So I think we could do either way. I'm just curious on board members' thoughts about that.
I think the only problem with that is we promised Wayne that money.
Yeah.
And if we take it to the voters and they say no, that
Right.
money's gone.
Correct. That is
So
definitely one
Our,
pro.
wo-
I
our-
mean,
our
does he
word
really
was
need
that
$150,000?
Well, we don't know.
though?
We want to have safety if
Promise all
we
of that?
have,
Did
we
promise that?
promised him enough for salt.
for safety
And
cushion.
He's,
Yes.
he says he uses his whole salt allotment every year.
Where are the bills to prove that?
Yeah, no, I don't think he always does, because we pulled up around 50, 60,000 was usually the typical. He has to contractually buy it up front, but then he doesn't always fill it because we don't have enough room in the salt shed.
Well, no, because he keeps getting deliveries all,
Right. But then at some point, he usually doesn't use the entire contract, is my understanding. So I agree with you. I think that would be a major pro to encumbering it, is that we know we have that cushion. The current budget has 45,000 in it, which is lower than his annual average, so we need some cushion. We do have the 10+ thousand that's in the capital reserve fund. So I think this board could certainly hash out what number we wanted to encumber, and or do we want to do a split? Do we want to encumber some amount and ask the voters to encumber some other amount into that fund, knowing that then that fund would be there next year and we wouldn't have to do an encumbrance
And
again?
all other years.
Right, until we spend it.
Well, I think we had that discussion during cutting, that we weren't gonna do a capital reserve because we're trying not to
Right.
skyrocket the tax rate.
Yeah.
So the more money we give back
Now,
and not encumbering
Yep.
is gonna affect the tax rate.
Yep.
So,
correct.
I mean, the $300,000 in cutting we did is useless if we spend the
Yep.
whatever's left in the
Correct.
unreserved fund balance.
Yep.
I mean, I think the unreserved fund balance is sitting somewhere around $600,000 right now. So there's still quite a bit.
No, it's more than that. That's just this year's portion of it.
Sure. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the stuff that's from,
Yeah.
I mean, I personally don't think he needs to encumber the entire 150.
No,
So-
100% not. He doesn't either. Wayne just wants to know he's not going to run out of salt. We promised him that.
So he's not going to run out of salt because in order to run out of salt, you have to run out of money.
Yes,
And I feel like,
correct. But we had definitely made that agreement with him.
Yep.
So I am with you, Andy. I think that encumbering it has a couple of benefits. It's a safety net that we know it will be there. And if we don't spend it, it just lapses back into the general fund. Whereas if we put it in the CRF, it has no ability to pay down the tax rate. Yeah, okay. So that has where we had kind of left it, but I just wanted to ask if anybody felt.
so do we need to
differently
come
about
up with an amount that we want to encumber
Yes.
towards that?
Yes, we
bill?
do. Yes, and I would argue that we should do enough to protect us, but knowing that we have the 45 plus the 10, we don't need a huge number, but we need a number that is going to make Wayne feel secure.
I'm sorry, and the 45 is from where?
45 is the current reduced budget
The
line item.
2025 budget.
That's the budget that had been at around 180,000, which is kind of the worst case Armageddon year.
Mhm.
And what he usually spends is around 50 to 60. So we first cut it to 90, then we cut it further to 45 with the understanding that we would encumber a little bit from this year to give us a buffer, plus the 10 that are 10 plus that we have sitting in the winter maintenance fund,
So for the upcoming budget, this is the
Right.
45?
45.
Gotcha.
So we should do a minimum encumbrance of 10, 15, 20,000, I would think, just to give that buffer. But I would be happy to hear any suggestions from the board.
And what's remaining in the present to encumber?
In Wayne's budget,
Yeah,
a lot.
okay.
His budget generally has the biggest delta because of the snow, the salt, the plow drivers. I can let you know in 1 second what's left in there.
A lot more than you're thinking about.
A lot, yeah.
Okay, all right.
How do people feel about encumbering 30 and putting 10 in the capital reserve?
He has $255,000 left in his,
Plenty.
between his two budgets.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. Which is actually what we're trying to remedy
Right.
by doing all of this, so that that number will shrink over time to a smaller, more satisfying number.
Well, it's closer to the actual.
Correct. So your suggestion is
30 to
30.
encumber, and then another 10 to the capital reserve in a warrant article.
do you feel strongly about wanting to not do that warrant article?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'm with you on that one. Because if we would have to do it the following year, or depending, we could encumber again, depending what happens this year. So I think I would prefer not to do a capital reserve fund if we don't have to.
Okay.
I don't know, Paul, do you want to be the,
Well, no, I agree, but was there a point to the 10?
I think part of it is that we need to decide what we want the target balance in that capital reserve to
Mhm.
be. And depending on what that is, we just have to start building it sooner rather than later, so we might as well.
Yeah.
Start sooner. And in terms of encumbering it or using it from unreserved fund balance versus raising and appropriating a new 10,000, that's also another way that we can, that's a choice we get to make.
sure. Yep. Would you be willing to amend your motion to just do the encumbrance?
Yeah.
Or do you want to put a vote on it?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, okay. So we have a motion on the table to encumber 30,000 for that salt contract. Any further discussion or alternate suggestions or amendments?
So 30,000 just seems to be a random number that we picked out of thin air. I would like to know from Wayne how many tons of salt we actually put down in a storm, and then figure out what, I mean, we have 10 weeks left of saltable weather.
Do you think that number's too high or too low?
I don't know. I think it's a random number that,
Yeah, I'm assuming you're basing it on prior year averages plus a little wiggle room. Right.
I'm basing it on prior year averages, which is like 50 to 60.
Mm-hmm.
And then we already have 45 in the budget, which would give us 75 plus whatever in the capital reserve plus
Yep.
whatever else he needs.
Do you feel, I mean, I feel like any number you pick is a little bit of a guesstimate, just based on, you know, your best guesstimate of what the weather's gonna do, which we don't know. But we don't wanna end up short and not be able to solve the roads.
I don't, again, that's not gonna happen.
well,
Yeah.
you can't say that because we've cut the budget so much, you don't know what is gonna happen. You can't overspend the budget.
You can't overspend the budget, the bottom line number, but you can overspend a single line.
Sure.
Correct, but you can't
Yep.
overspend the bottom line.
We shouldn't plan
cut
to
the
do that.
budget.
We are nowhere near in danger of that, which is the whole reason why we picked the numbers we picked. That there is still some,
We left some buffer in the budget.
because we are doing this for the first time, because we are
We did
getting
not
things
cut
on the
every,
accurate
every dollar
lines.
and cent that we could have, or else we would have been in very tight situation. But I hear you. You want to do a safe number.
I mean,
Would
we could go
you-
find out how much salt he usually buys. Like literally, we have all the invoices. Like, what's the worst winter you can remember in the last 5 years? It's not a trick. Like literally, which year should we look at?
Well, didn't we look up the past 5 years? And that's where we got the
Yes.
average of 50 to 60?
Yep.
So that's the average?
Yeah, over, I think we looked back 4 or 5 years?
I think we look back 5 years.
5. Yeah, it was averaging around 50 to 60.
Would it make you feel better if we encumbered instead of 30, like 45? That would be 45 on top of the 45 plus another 10 that's in reserve, that's 100.
I would even go 40.
40.
Because anything that's not spent goes back to the general fund. So it's not lost.
I just don't want to panic Wayne. We promised him something.
Yep. I'd be okay with 40. I mean, we know it's a buffer. That buffer used to be $130,000, so we're making progress. If it's a smaller buffer, we're doing better. If you feel more comfortable with that, Letty, would you be amenable to?
I would vote no, but not because
Okay.
I just don't think it's necessary.
Well, I mean, if you don't think it's necessary, then.
No,
I'm-
but I'm one of 4
Well,
tonight.
I don't know that it's necessary either, to be honest.
Also, I think don't overthink it, because if we encumbered nothing, that money goes back to the taxpayers potentially, if that's how we set the tax rate in the fall. If we encumber it and we don't spend it, the money goes back to the taxpayers. So we are not, if we guess too high, we are not hurting the taxpayers in any way.
Just takes an extra year.
Correct. Yes, it would potentially take an extra year, yes.
Right.
So it's that, there's no harm to the taxpayer, and I think Andy's just trying to make sure Wayne does not get the heebie-jeebies.
What do you mean it takes an extra year?
Because it's the unassigned fund balance from the audit the year prior that you use to set your tax rate. So that money would carry forward a year, I believe is what you're implying, right?
No, what I'm saying is if we put this into the 2025 budget, now it's extra money in 2026, not 2025. So the money that we give back now goes to setting the tax rate in
This fall.
November of 2025.
Mhm.
If we don't use an encumbrance, that
Then we
gets
have
rolled
to wait until
over,
the
Right.
next, until after 25 is closed.
Right.
Yep, I see.
would not be used to offset the budget until 2026.
It would still make its way back into the ability to pay down the tax rate. So we have one motion for 30, we have a suggestion for 40. How would the board like to proceed? Do you want to vote on your motion
Paul's the
first?
deciding vote, so.
Well, we need it on number.
We only got 4 here, so we need at least 3. Paul, are you comfortable with 40?
Yeah, or 35.
Letty, would you be willing to retract your motion, or do you want to vote on it? Or see if there's a second for you?
What?
Do you want to retract your motion for
Yeah, I can
30?
retract my motion.
Great. Paul or Andy, would you like to make an alternate motion?
Paul moves 35, I'll second it.
Move for 35.
Okay, with a
Second.
second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And I'm an aye, so that will pass 3-1. Thank you very much. Wayne will be happy, we will be good. And then we will look at what this coming year's expenses are and maybe have a discussion about that capital reserve fund for the next year. Anything else that I'm missing for encumbrances that anybody knows of? Nope.
I don't think
Okay,
so.
so we will close that out. Next on the agenda here is the earned time payout policy. So there have been discussions going on behind the scenes, so just to make sure all board members are on the same page. In the past, Brentwood did not have any sort of written policy about paying out earned time. They did have a policy of carrying over 2 weeks of vacation to the next year. So if you didn't use vacation, you could always carry over 2 weeks. Last year, we really felt strongly as a board that we wanted to put this on paper and just get clarity and just clean it up so that we wouldn't have to be having any uncomfortable conversations about exceptions and things like that. And so in May of last year, this board, everybody who was here was present, changed that policy to carry forward 80 hours, which is what it already was.
Or 96.
We did put an asterisk that 80 hours would be adjusted for 24-hour firefighters to 2 weeks for them, which was 96 hours. And that we would make a new policy that had not been in place prior, that you could get a payout of up to an additional week. So if you had 3 weeks of vacation and you came to December 31st and you had not used those 3 weeks, you could automatically carry over 2, you could get a payout of 1. And we left that as the policy. We did put a small asterisk where if there was an extenuating circumstance, some other issue, that people could come to the board for one-off exceptions. We have struggled a little bit this year. I think Letty and I would be pretty honest and transparent that trying to pick up earned time from our prior town administrator was challenging, and trying to use her prior record keeping and try to read
system.
her mind has been pretty challenging for us. So we have done our absolute best, but it has been a challenging thing to deal with earned time, and we've really tried to do our best. So what we did is we notified everybody who got their 2-week rollover and their payout. Some people in town got a 40-hour payout, a full week. Some people got less than that. They got whatever hours they had remaining. We did make one small mistake with a firefighter where he could have carried over a few extra hours, but we made a mistake because we were forgetting that fire had an exception. So I apologized for that error, and that firefighter is fine with that. So what happened since then is a couple of employees in town have been expressing that they would like to see the policy changed, and they would like to see some mechanism for additional payouts. I think I understand where that comes from, and I know that we have some people in town who tend to not utilize their vacation. We talked about that last year in May, that we really wanted people for their mental and physical health to use their vacation. And so I had sent a communication on Monday of last week to everyone who was getting the maximal payout of 40 hours and had additional hours that they were going to lose. And I just said to those people, if you feel strongly that you would like to petition the board for an exception, please let me know by Friday. There is one employee who said, if the board would be willing to consider, I would like to be considered for an exception. I did not hear back from any of the other employees, although verbally I've heard from 3 of them that they did not want an exception and they were absolutely fine with the policy. There are some other employees in town who I think are a little bit frustrated and feel that there are certain people in town who should be paid out or deserve a payout, while they also acknowledge that that is not in our current policy. So there's been a little bit of friction, and I'm bringing it to this board for us to discuss tonight. Just from our policy standpoint, I understand that other employees have their own personal feelings about this. So I really want to hear from this board how you would like to proceed. We did do an exception payout for Jillian, given that her direct supervisor was absent for the last several months of the year and that she forfeited vacation because of that to help us. And we all felt that was an extenuating circumstance that deserved, and she got I believe like a 1 week payout for that. So I guess I want to hear from the board. Does anyone on this board want to modify the policy right now? Do we want to talk about modifying the policy in the coming year after further discussions with our new TA and town employees? And as a second question to the board, is this board amenable to hearing the request from the one person who did get back to me by the deadline that I set? Or would the board like to handle that differently? So it's a little bit of a sensitive subject. Whenever you're talking about people's pay, it gets sensitive. I get that. We are trying to do the right thing, the transparent thing here. And we did make that policy for a reason. So I guess I'm just curious to hear board members' thoughts on how they would like to proceed with what is, can be a little bit of a tough subject when you're talking about people's earned time that they feel they have and, a right to be paid out despite what our town policy is. So I will leave it at that and open it up to the rest of you to weigh in on that.
I guess, so just for clarity, the reason you sent the email to all of the other people that would have lost time in addition to Jillian was just to make sure that everyone had the same opportunity.
For fairness, because we had made an exception for Jillian, I wanted everyone else. And also, I think my impression, I could be wrong, is that the employees didn't have a good sense of what their earned time was.
Okay.
That I don't think it had been reported very reliably to them. And then when you and I took over, we were having trouble figuring out what the hours were. So I did it as a courtesy to say, heads up, I think there were 6 people I sent the email to, that I said, you potentially are going to lose some hours. If you feel that you have an extenuating circumstance and would like to petition the board, let me know by Friday.
Mhm.
And then I heard from one of those 6 by that deadline. But then I received an email yesterday from some other employees voicing some desire to see the policy amended.
Amended how? Because I feel like we spent, a significant amount of time last year going through this, and I thought we came up with a pretty reasonable policy. I mean, I can tell you, running a business for many years now is, we have personal time, and we allow people, to move that personal time over that isn't used over into the next year to like we do, but we don't generally, permit payouts. But, we permitted the payout. I think that was generous. So now we're being asked to pay out further.
I can't speak for all the employees. I can say that there is a feeling that there are some employees in town who accumulate a fairly large number of hours that they don't use, and that some other employees on their behalf feel that there's some unfairness there.
But it's a benefit. It's not part of
Correct.
compensation, in
Correct.
my opinion. And
Correct.
if we're going to start compensating that, then we're, again, adding, increased monies to our obligations. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable what we did. Probably a lot more generous than what most employers do.
Yeah, that I can't speak to. I'm not really sure what the.
Can we separate the two things? Can we separate what we want to do now and what we might want to do moving forward? I have no problem considering the policy. I just don't think now is the time to do it
Agreed.
in the middle of a.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think after the fact is not, when we just set this, this is the first year the policy has even been active. So changing it on the fly during the process does not feel good to me, but I did just want to bring that up to the board and see how they felt about it. So
I mean, if
Paul,
someone has a particular, exception that they feel like we had with Jillian, I'm always willing to hear that.
yeah, and that's why I sent that email, because I just wanted to be fair and transparent and let people know if it even could possibly apply to them, that I wanted to give them a window to make that request for fairness purposes.
Andy, you've been quiet.
I know, I'm waiting for Auntie to weigh in here.
Actually, Paul actually stated what I was going to say, is that unless you're a shift worker, as in a firefighter that's on the floor or a police officer on patrol, it costs the town money to pay you out your time because I don't backfill you if you take vacation.
Mm-hmm.
A shift worker, I have to backfill at usually an overtime rate, so it's more cost effective for the town to pay out that money than it is. But if you're talking somebody that doesn't get backfilled, now it becomes part of their salary and it's increasing their salary rather than being a benefit of taking time off.
Yeah, and I think when we made that policy in May, we were trying to be fair, and we did allow, I think for the first time, a designated payout, right? I don't think Brentwood had ever had an official policy.
No.
So by my estimate, the like 15 or 16 people got at least a partial payout that they had never received before. So I personally felt we had already tried to be generous and fair. And so I think I'm with these guys in that I would like to stick by our policy. And if we want to rediscuss it with a new town administrator and some new employee engagement next year, I'm happy to rediscuss it, but I don't think we should change it now.
Sorry, I just wasn't there
Yeah.
last December when the initial conversations were
Yes.
happening. So I understand there wasn't a policy, but was there a how we do it in Brentwood version? Like, was there something that was typically done?
So that was when Chief Byrd had come to us to request a payout or to request an additional payout after the board had already voted to do a 48-hour payout for 4 town employees, 2 police officers, Wayne and Joe. And then he had come back to
How were
us.
those selected?
That was selected because 2 police officers had agreed to donate their PTO to a colleague, and then that colleague didn't need it. And by the time they knew he didn't need it, they couldn't take vacation.
Okay.
And so the ask was, this was an extenuating circumstance that these people were planning on taking vacation and then they couldn't because of this. So the initial request was for 2 police officers. We then asked our town administrator, who else would this apply to? And we were told Wayne and Joe Byrd. So this board voted after some spirited discussion to allow for a 48-hour payout with the asterisk that none of us loved the feeling because it was outside of a policy and it was another one-off.
Yeah.
And that we very much wanted to get away from one-offs, which is why we then
That's how we got
made
the
a policy
I
5
gotcha.
months
I
later.
gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
to try to not have to do one-offs. And this board could just decide that we don't ever allow exceptions. That would probably be the cleanest, but things happen. People's bosses disappear from the office.
People's
So,
parents get
other
ill.
things happen. So I was okay with the exception, but maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation if we just were like, no exceptions. But we're trying to be fair
No,
and fair and reasonable employers.
Now that you're bringing it back, you're giving me PTSD.
It was an uncomfortable moment, I think, for a lot of people in town, and
I
we
was not
didn't want to.
comfortable.
We didn't want to do that again, which is why we made a policy that we thought was fair.
Yeah, which I thought was reasonable.
So I'm hearing a general consensus from the board to leave the policy as it is, but leave a window open for further discussion if there's if employees have a different alternate version of the policy they'd like to see in place in the future, we could discuss that with our new TA. Is that accurate? Paul baby is like, I'm happy with I don't want to change anything. But
I'm always, I'm
at
all,
least
I'm all,
the
I'll
ability
listen.
to discuss
will
it in
listen.
the future as needed.
Yes.
So how would the board decide if the exception is warranted? Would it be a
That's
share? Like,
what,
how are we going to decide
So
that?
like with Jillian's, we put it on the agenda to be, because it's spending. So I think we should do that in public, transparently. I think in general, like I said, we can decide if we want to continue to allow exceptions. But I think that should be done in public for transparency and fairness to all
By the board.
by the board. Yeah. Because it's spending decisions.
So I guess I would be curious to know what the other person's exception request was based on.
Yeah, sure. Does the board feel comfortable that that first issue is closed? And I do want to acknowledge that there are some employees in town who are not going to 100% love this decision, and I respect that, but I hope they respect us, that we are trying to follow a policy that we felt was fair and that allowed for additional payouts this year. So hopefully we can maybe agree to disagree a little bit about that. So we'll consider that topic closed. The second one is the only request that I received to my email was from Daphne. Daphne requested to be paid out 1 week of vacation because she had a vacation planned in December that she had to cancel and actually come into work because Joyce Kegel was out of the office due to a family medical issue. And so that was actually a circumstance where she had a vacation booked, planned. She'd already announced to all of her coworkers that she was going to be out of the office, and then she had to cancel that vacation to come work. So the board can certainly discuss whether they feel that that is a reasonable exception to our policy, but that is the only request that I received.
Do you know when in December was it at the beginning of December or the end of December?
I believe it was over the Christmas, New Year
Okay, so there would have
holiday.
been no
It
way
was-
for her
Yeah,
to.
it was over the actual holiday period because their office was already sort of lightly staffed with the holiday, for holiday coverage. And so she had to be here, else the office would not have been staffed. So, these are things like, to me, that's a valid, but like I said, it might be cleaner in the future just to have none, because I think this is the feeling we don't like, is being the judge and jury on who has a valid exemption and who doesn't. I don't love that feeling, but I think this one feels pretty valid to me because I know that when we were here on New Year's Eve, she was here and she was like, I'm supposed to be on vacation right now. And we were like, yep, sorry, we know that you are. So that was, to me, that's an extenuating circumstance, but I leave that up to the majority of the board to decide.
I wonder if it would make sense if we consider changes to the policy in the future, if we limit what the additional payout could be.
We could,
Like
I mean,
no more
anything's-
than.
it's all open. Does anybody feel strongly about that request, either approve, deny, or further discussion for that?
Could, instead of a payout, can we allow her to carry it?
I think we absolutely could. I had asked her if she had a preference, and she said her preference would be a payout, but I'm sure she would be thankful for a rollover if that's what the board felt more comfortable with.
Because that would be less financially. She'd be able to take a vacation.
I mean, I think that would be generous if the board prefers that over a payout. And she and Heather are both increasing their hours to the point that it theoretically should be a little bit easier for them to staff that office, depending what happens with Joyce, who is definitely having some family medical struggles that may impact her availability in 2025. What would the board like to do?
I agree with that. I think carrying it over makes sense.
Okay. Do you want to make that as a motion?
Sure.
Second.
Further discussion? Letty, any further thoughts on that?
No.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to allow Daphne Was to do a 1-week carryover. That is not all of her hours. She will lose some hours.
That was
but
what
it
I was
was-
trying to look up, but I didn't get there. in time.
I want to say she had double that maybe. So it would be a carryover of
So she's
half
still
of her.
not getting everything.
She's still losing some hours
Okay.
like other employees, yes. Yep. So we have a motion and a second for a 1-week carryover for Daphne. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I'm an aye, so we will do that, and I will let her know. Thank you very much. Okay. Next on here, we have our 2025 revaluation bid. Board members all have that in front of you in hard copy, and I had sent it out electronically. So I would like to thank KRT for sending us over this bid. This is the company that did our reval last time in 2020. And I'm thankful, this was our only bid. I have to say, I'm not shocked by that because Jim Michaud had let the board know kind of offline that what he was hearing in the market is that it was really tight to try to find people for 5-year revals and that the market had been really busy and a little constrained this year. So I was very glad to see that we did get this bid, as it is a legal obligation of ours to do a reval this year. So I don't know if the board wants to discuss this in detail. I did ask Jim to review it and let us know his thoughts on it, so I just wanted to bring it before the board. They did indicate, if you look in the beginning of their bid, their time frame, I think their bid is good for 60 days from the opening date of the proposal. And so we have a little bit of time to make a decision. That being said, this is our only bid. And they bid for a price of $155,000 in total for the full reeval of our 2,044 parcel count in Brentwood.
You do the calculation, it comes out to $75.83 per parcel.
75, oh, really? Okay. All right.
What do
That
we
actually
have in,
doesn't sound that bad.
what do we have in the capital reserve?
We had, I think we have just less than that. Hold on one second and I'll tell you. Last year at town meeting, we had 118,000. We put 25,000 more in, and then there's presumably been a little bit of interest growth since then. So we have, you know, something in the ballpark just below what we need. Maybe we've got 143, 145,000, so we'll probably need to ask the public to put some additional funds in that, as we generally do every year at town meeting. And so we are likely just a little short. I suspect that was because of just underestimation of inflationary increases. We had a target balance of 135 listed in that account, and looks like it's coming in at 155.
I would say just hold this to allow Jim to review it and then,
Yeah, when do we need to, I'm seeing a timeline.
The price is good for 60 days. They did note in here that they recommended a slight modification of the timeline to give them, I think, an extra month. They felt, given that we went to bid just a little, I think a month later than the last time, that they did not feel they could finish it by August. And I want to say, yeah, September 12th is what they quoted as the completion date. So on here, they have a projected start date in mid-February. So the idea was that we would need to get back to them and make an agreement with them before then. And then the completion, as I mentioned, would be in mid-September. One other thing I just want to point out is Daphne, Heather, and I did about an hour and a half long webinar today with the Avatar company, which is the company that Daphne had brought forward for us that she would very much be in favor of us researching, contracting with for appraising, for assessing town clerk and tax collector. And we had a good discussion with them today that a reeval year is the perfect year to change your appraising software over, because you already have to investigate every parcel. And so moving it over is sort of the perfect time to do that. And so one reason we may want to hold is we would have to check with KRT and make sure that they were comfortable with the idea of us doing the switch. I do note that they indicate in here that they have familiarity with Avatar as one of the companies that they work with. And so I think that that's another just sort of open question that we need to circle back with them
Yeah,
on.
that was kind of my question. I just was wondering if it looks like final valuations would be in by 8/8. Could we tie that into when we're switching over?
I think Avatar was going to get back to me on sort of the best practice of whether you switch over. Daphne felt that no matter what we did, our summer tax bill will almost definitely have to still be out of BMSI. So we have to take that into consideration, plus KRT, plus the reval. So
Sure,
I
I'm
think
just
it's a little
wondering
bit
if
of an open
after that
question, what the best
summer
timing
bill,
is.
if we could start moving towards the transition with the idea
I
that we
think
couldn't
so.
finalize
That was the
until
sense
they
that I
sent in their
got.
things.
Was that doing it sort of with KRT was the best way to do it. And sometimes I think there's sort of a duplicative system going on where you're still using BMSI for your day-to-day work and your tax bill, but you're populating Avatar at the same time. You're just not
And checking
using it
and making
yet.
sure that everything's
Right. So I think that's what we'll need to check between KRT and Avatar and our new town administrator, who, by the grace of the universe, just went through this in Candia. So Candia did this exact transition. They transitioned, I think, no, they didn't have BMSI. They transitioned from something to Avatar and had a reval, and now are transitioning to MTS for the other side of all their financial software. So I think Andrea will be able to give us her perspective, and the folks at Avatar were like, oh yeah, we know Andrea. So it's going to be sort of a nice, like, I think, continuing this conversation once Andrea is here is going to be very helpful. Does that sound reasonable? Oh, here we go. Here's the, they said all KRT employees are experienced with using multiple
Which
systems.
section is that?
It is the C under why hire KRT.
Oh, I see. Okay.
CAMA versatility.
Mm-hmm.
All employees are experienced with using Visions, Appraisal, Vision, Patriot Assess Pro, Avatar, and Trio. So I think given that KRT uses both, I would assume they would be on board with helping us with the transition. So everyone's comfortable with just kind of reviewing this, turfing it out a week or two, talking with Jim, talking with Andrea.
Hey, look.
Okay.
I found somebody.
Oh, hey. Sounds good? Okay, perfect. All right. Last on our discussion action items is the ad hoc budget communications group, which I believe has a prelim communications strategy to communicate with us.
Sounds like there's some communications going on.
There's some communications occurring.
Take one and pass it on. Coming up to the big table.
Come on up. Jim is a member of the committee with you,
There's
correct?
a member of the committee with me. There are 7 of us, 8 of us.
7.
7. We started meeting pretty quickly right after I sent that email, and we've been meeting every week since then to try to get this done in time to hopefully get it's attached to the table. So that we can hopefully get this into people's hands for the budget hearing. The budget hearing is historically not very well attended. And I think our hope was that if we gave people information ahead of time, that they would be more interested in participating.
Can you remind the public and the board what the essential goal of your committee was in terms of what the main communication goals were that your group had?
We want to encourage residents, taxpayers to participate. We want to give them information that they can digest easily.
Yep.
To allow them to see not how the budget sausage is made, but an overview, et cetera, and to engage them to attend meetings, be it a public meeting or deliberative sessions or town meetings, et cetera, to allow them to digest easily digestible information.
There was also, oh, go ahead.
And one of the vehicles we would hope we'd be able to allow this information to be placed onto the town website as well. Now, with all of the numbers being in flux still, this is just a template, if you will, that doesn't have these numbers are not printable, publishable numbers. Everything's still in flux.
'Cause that just got finalized last night, so
Yeah.
we need to just double check
And
everything.
I think we're pretty close, Jillian, to closing out all the invoices for 2024. Yeah, so we should, so our actuals should be almost cleaned up too. Okay? Anything further you wanted to say?
Yeah, the only other thing I think that would be pertinent is we felt like it was important that this be a document presented by just taxpayers. It is not a document that comes from the select board, from the town administrator, from the budget committee. All of those, hopefully all of those people will agree that these numbers are accurate,
Yep.
because the goal is to provide accurate information, like you said, that's easily digestible for the average person. And the other thing that had come up was some people on the committee had talked about a mailer that they had gotten in their mailboxes over the summer, and the committee had discussed whether or not if the select board would be interested in mailing this out to residents so that there would be absolutely no excuse for people saying that they didn't know.
Presumably along with the communication about like the budget hearing date and
Oh,
things
yes,
like that.
yes.
I guess what I'm looking for some clarification on is if the select board reviews, approves the numbers, are we going to frame this as a document that is citizen-generated, select board, budcom reviewed? Are we going to propose this as something that has the rubber stamp from the town, that is backed by the town? Like how is your group optimally wanting to convey the sort of origin and ownership of this document? Did you guys talk about that?
We discussed this at length, and the bad news is anything that has the blessings of the Select Board or Budget Committee has a stigma attached to it, to the taxpayers out there. They've seen all the budgets go up with all the head nodding, et cetera, and they're just tired of the drastic increases everywhere. So we were trying to figure out a way to create a document that is detached from a select board and budcom approval
Sure.
Could we,
to the taxpayer. Go ahead.
because I kind of hear, we do need, because we are going to confirm.
We need
that
the
the
public to
numbers-
know that the numbers are accurate, right? Which I'm not arguing that you would put inaccurate
Yeah.
numbers out, but like, so how do we, because I hear what you're saying. If it comes from a group of taxpayers, I'm fine with that, but how do we let people know that this didn't come from somebody with like an agenda, that it is like verifiable numbers? Do we just have budcom confirm it? Do we post the full budget on the website so people can confirm it for themselves?
the
that these are
question
the
would
right
be,
numbers?
do you think it's the approved by that is problematic, or could we say the budget committee and the select board agree that our
Reviewed for
numbers are
accuracy.
correct?
Ultimately, the town meeting is a budcom
Yep,
town meeting.
the
So,
budget is.
so therefore, theoretically, this would be a budcom
Endorsed, reviewed,
or
Well, I don't-
confirmed.
did
like-
not hate it kind of thing.
Did not hate it.
Did not find any
Stamp.
glaring
Yeah.
errors.
Did not hate. I think that's reasonable. I just feel like, I actually really like that this is citizen-driven, but I do think we want to make sure the citizens know that the numbers match what is going to be presented, and that there's no modifications or, differences, because it needs to be accurate if it's going to do its job.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
maybe,
yeah.
and if BudCom's the appropriate group, I have no problem with it not being us. I just think it should be
Someone other than us.
someone who can
group of random
confirm,
people.
whether it's Jack Mitchell or whatever. I think we need to make sure that people know. And if we're going to use taxpayer money to mail it,
Mhm.
then it gets a little murky, because then I think it is a town,
Yeah, I would
Right.
say,
that gets
I
a
would
little
say
murky, I think.
let it, we avoid
Okay.
taxpayer funding any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Might be something worth talking to the committee about.
Sure.
Handle that issue.
I think
'Cause
a
I think
couple,
once we
I think
pay
a
for
couple
it-
of the members of the committee were willing to fund it.
I mean, I don't love the idea of people spending money out of their own pocket, but I do think if we pay for it, it does look like it is a town-produced document, whether that's what, it
But
sounds like
then-
that's not what you would prefer.
I think especially since it's the first year, though. We don't-
Yeah.
But then the other thing that comes into play would be the use of the town website.
Mm.
Is that great? Is that bad? Is that faux pas?
I think we spent a lot of time and effort to get that website up to be as transparent and information sharing as possible. So I think if your committee wants it there, it will get exposure there. Maybe the way you say this is a citizen-generated document, and we could label it that way. I mean, it's whatever your group feels comfortable with, because I
Mhm.
think this is all good. This is all good. This is all about transparency. And I understand that your group worked hard to not let any personal feelings or agendas in here. And I've reviewed it, and it's not in here. It's just factual information.
Yeah.
So whatever, I want your group to feel comfortable with how it's handled and publicized. I think if you don't mail it and don't put it on the website, we can certainly submit it. I don't know if your group is planning on submitting it to the Brentwood newsletter.
It's not going to get out in time.
Oh, okay.
So we did discuss that. Because the budget hearing's on the 10th and the February issue is already pretty much printed, there's no way to get it to people.
Oh, before the 10th. Gotcha. So I guess I would have to defer those decisions to your committee of how you want to handle getting it out into people's eyeballs.
I guess we can double check all these numbers. I guess the committee would need to figure out how to check it with the select board, or what. how
It
do
sounds
we-
like BudCom was.
No,
maybe the
BudCom,
preference.
we avoid these
for even
select
the
board.
for even the actual expenditures for past years.
Yep.
And then hopefully we could bring something maybe next week that is like finalized, checked, ready to be put wherever the board would like to, if they'd like to. And then we can go from there.
Does the board feel comfortable that if BudCom reviews the numbers for accuracy and for accuracy of the document, that they feel comfortable with it being circulated?
Yeah, it's a great idea. Or another option would be that, the new town administrator can verify the numbers.
No.
True, that's a
BudCom.
little, that's kind of a lot for her to ask her to do too,
Okay.
like,
All right.
welcome.
It defeats the purpose of what they're trying. It's still an
They're
arm of
trying
the
to do a
select
little
board.
separation from, the people who are making the sausage, I think.
That's fine.
The only downside I truly see is what makes this citizen group any different than anybody else who wants to submit onto the town website? You know what I mean? Hey, how come they got to do it, we didn't? Big devil's advocate here.
I know that this is going to be crazy, but I totally agree with Jim on this. Like, I don't like the precedent. I know, everyone, I'm glad you're all sitting down. But I don't
I
like
mean,
the
that is the downside.
You
I don't
don't
like
like
the precedent.
of the
that's
website.
It's not this. I don't like the precedent that we're going down.
Although it is an ad hoc group that this board supported the creation of, so that's maybe a little bit different than any other citizen.
Okay. So I guess the question then would be, how do things get put on the web? Who decides what goes on the website?
In general, it's been select board, Daphne, town administrator, people in the town admin who decide what goes on.
So it's actually department heads are in
And
charge of
department heads,
each
right.
section.
Yep.
So
You could ask BudCom if they would post it on their page, if they're the ones that are
Then
reviewing.
it's got the BudCom stigma.
To your
But-
point, Jim, I think the only thing that works is if it's a citizen document submitted to the BudCom posts it to the
For their
website
use?
As a citizen.
as an accurate description of the budget by the BudCom.
Didn't Steve Dawson do something similar last year on
He came and
BudCom? And
presented
it was
to us.
inside the agenda or something like that?
Yes, he came and presented to BudCom. BudCom approved it as accurate, came and presented to us, and I do think that ended up on the website
That's the only
because those groups approved that it was accurate.
agenda, website through like agenda posting or something. I
Yeah.
don't.
no, I think it was just literally a document that they uploaded, but I can check. I guess that's what I'm saying is that the select board doesn't check what the BudCom posts.
No,
So
yeah. So, okay, so what I'm hearing is general board assessment that a transparent, accurate document that comes from citizens is a good thing. We're all in favor of it, and we will, I guess, defer to your group how you plan to interface with BudCom about whether they just review it, whether they just say, these numbers match our numbers, and whether you choose to ask them to post it or not. But
And
you're
then it would-
worried
it would-
about the posting?
It would approach the website via a BudCom
It could
umbrella
be
versus
under
a
their link, yeah.
private citizen group that get to do what they want on the town website.
Right.
That's not
No,
good.
well, that's why I was saying like Steve Dawson last year came in and did a presentation to BudCom, and it was I don't recall the specifics of the presentation, but it was around a communication effort around the budget,
Mhm.
something not totally dissimilar.
Yep.
Okay, he came, presented.
It was on the agenda.
It was on the agenda and it was included in the packet. You know, like when, before our meetings, there's like a packet that's published with the agenda. It was included in the web, this is my recollection, on the website within that packet, if that makes sense.
No.
As someone who asked to be on the agenda.
Right, so it wasn't like a very prominently, published Steve Dawson's posting on brentwoodnh.gov, but it was still available on the website.
But I do think after they reviewed it, they then approved and voted to have it come here. He then gave it to us, and I do think it ended up posted on the website. So, you know, like I said, I'm happy to defer that to you folks, because I think if you want to have some separation from how the sausage is made, I get that. And so I guess it's up to you. If you have some generous donors who want to pay for it to be printed,
Paying for it to be printed is
Then
one part. I think
that's
the
whole
website
other
thing
discussion your
in
group
terms
can
of
have.
getting people's eyes on it. We can figure out.
So what I'm hearing is general assent to allow this group to move forward, as long as that caveat that BudCom confirms that the numbers being conveyed are accurate. Because I think it would really hurt this initiative if the numbers don't match what we present at town meeting.
Jack was there last week.
Yeah.
And Michelle is there too.
Great.
So
Perfect. So they're going to make sure the numbers
we're gonna
are
make sure the numbers are
great. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it. All right. All right, we will now turn over to regular business, and we will have Becky also come up for regional associations. Do you want to do that first, Becky? Sure. Thanks. In our packet, we have a memo from her committee dated January 9th. All right, Becky, floor is yours.
Thank you. This is what we typically do. We meet in the fall after the applications are received. We discuss the applications, review them, make a decision, then present it to the select board for your endorsement. So this year was pretty much the same. The application period was Labor Day through October 30. The 5 applications that were received were pretty much level funded from the previous year. And when I came here in October about budget, and there was a question about why we were not increasing the budget, those that had been received by that time were all level funded. So we didn't anticipate any increases. So all 4 met the criteria, pretty much the same groups that we have funded in the past. So we've discussed each one, and as you see in the memo, made the allocations, which were exactly what they requested. We did not have to reduce any of them. And that total came to $12,357. After that, we noted that our budget of $18,000 was overfunded. So we came to you a few weeks ago and asked if it could be reduced in the budget process by $5,000. So we easily met the requests this year. So you agreed to that. We also discussed, because of some confusion about whether the process was followed through, and recipients for 2024 were notified that they were funded. I called each one, talked to each one. It was a mixed message. Some reasons why a couple of groups didn't submit this year was because they had new staff, and the new staff wasn't familiar with the process. Everyone now who was funded last year has been paid. All is it down, so we've met all our commitments. So we're going to review the process. We're suggesting, rather than the process was that after town meeting, they would be notified by April 15 that they were funded, and they would then ask for the check in a letter or an email. We thought that was more complicated. It would simplify it if we just automatically issued the checks after the town budget was approved. That way it would save office staff time. And for a couple of these organizations that have very small staff, it simplifies it for them. We would just request that we would be notified when the checks went out so that we're aware that the process was complete. So that was our second recommendation. The third was to be able to use the website effectively. We suggested a separate meeting in January so we could review the minutes from our fall meeting and get them onto the website. So it was transparency, and it would be posted instead of waiting till the following year. So those were our 3 recommendations. And that's what I'm coming to you for, is just to endorse our discussions and our decisions and move forward from there.
Great. Any board questions or comments for Becky?
I think the only other thing that I would add, I like just automatically sending the check,
Yes,
because it does
yes.
help with if whoever was volunteering that day
It
to
sh-
open
yes.
the mail.
Yes.
And then also I think if we could just put in there, reminder, don't forget to sign up again on September 1st.
That's what I found out when I called each of the organizations. The larger groups do have it automatically in their calendar so that they know when to apply. The smaller groups weren't doing that. So we've made that recommendation.
Great.
Yes.
Other questions or comments?
something we're voting on, or?
I think in general, we take a vote to accept their recommendations for dispersing the funds after town meeting.
Mhm.
And are you looking for a vote for those other recommendations or?
Yes, I would like
Okay,
that
so
because then,
to approve all of your committee's
Yes.
recommendations plus the disbursements here.
yes, so we will work with Stephanie to amend the application process, what's posted on the website, so
Great.
that people know what the process revision is.
Great.
And the application form, which I have to give credit to Steph Lewington, she did a fabulous job making it look professional. It's easier to read. It was simpler to evaluate the numbers when we saw that.
Nice.
So it simplifies the process. So I want to congratulate her and thank her for doing that. So
Thanks, Steph.
yes,
All right. Paul, you interested in making a motion?
Well,
The question.
actually, no.
Okay.
I realize, and I may have forgotten this last year, because it's the same groups basically, but I actually represent Southern New Hampshire Services, so I probably should.
You abstain from that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Paul, abstain?
Yes.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
And the last bit of information, which I didn't have time to put into here, we met last week and just reviewed everything, approved the minutes, so they will be posted. I notified the committee that I am stepping aside as chair,
Okay.
and I nominated Laura Hajar to become the chair. Her background in community service and public policy suits well. I will stay on until my term ends in '26, but I think after 5 years, it's time to have new leadership rotate in.
All right. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for all your hard work on this, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
And any townspeople listening, remember that if you know of any charities, specifically ones that benefit people who live in Brentwood, who might not know about our charitable giving, please give them a heads up that they can always apply in the future. We'll now go to general board business. Did you have anything for me today? I don't think you did, and I think everything else I have is for non-public. Let me just make sure I'm not missing something. No. Okay, so we will turn over to Andy for the first committee update or general board business.
I have no committee updates, just a reminder that dog licenses are available. Don't forget to register your pooch.
Good. John?
June, is that what you said?
No. John,
Oh.
you're next in line.
My bad.
You have the floor.
All set. Nothing.
Okay. Paul?
Conservation Commission, there was not much in the way of, voting on specific business per se, but we had an interesting presentation by an Andrew Fisk of Northeast Regional Director of American Rivers, and he spoke to us about dam removal and actually the benefits of dam removal. So I thought it was an interesting perspective in light of what we're dealing with in the present
Sure.
scenario. So whoever, it's out there for people to view, different perspective.
Okay. Anything else you had to share with the board?
I think there was anything that needs to be shared. Yeah.
There's still another parcel that's still being discussed in non-public at this point, right? Okay. Okay, so we'll wait for updates when that's ready.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Letty?
Andrea starts next week.
If you haven't heard the excitement in our voices.
There's a planning board meeting on Thursday, but I think that's it.
Alibi, the rec encumbrance request from Andy, did you see that?
We discussed it tonight.
Okay.
You missed that, but there's sort of some back and forth about the legality of encumbrances and whether you need a quote versus a contract, et cetera. And so what we got from Andy was a quote. And so we are just double checking in the absence of a town administrator that is sufficient before voting on that one.
That's
because
fair.
it wasn't-
My understanding from years prior was that was sufficient.
Yeah, we just want to make sure.
That's fine.
Okay. Other board business? Okay. From my perspective, I already gave all my updates from BudCom last night. I will remind the board that this Thursday, there is a board-only select board conversation about the ALS program. So if anyone can be there, that would be a learning education for select boards in the area to have a group discussion about that.
will be at the planning board, so if somebody who's not
Yes,
me could go,
it
that'd be
also
cool.
is, I think there's also a co-op meeting that night. So there's a lot going on this Thursday, but if any board members, just remember I had passed that around last week and it came to us by email about that particular meeting. I think
Six, I believe.
I think it's at 6. I can resend the email to everybody just to remind them.
I'll check my calendar.
Okay. And I think that was all
6 at the old high school.
I had. BudCom is going to have another meeting, I want to say on January 27th. And by then, hopefully, we will have worked with Andrea to clean up all the language of all the various warrants that are floating out there and get those approved and over to them so they can take action on the warrants on that day. So stay tuned for that. And I think that is all that I have. We do have a couple different things for non-public. The ones I know of is legal, hiring, and reputation. Does anyone on the board have anything additional that doesn't fall into one of those categories? The one that you had emailed me about, I'm putting under reputation,
Which one is he coming in?
hiring.
Okay.
Does
Oh,
everybody
that's
feel
right.
comfortable with that?
Yep.
So legal, hiring is B, legal is L, reputation is C. So B, C, and L. I will take a motion to enter non-public.
So moved.
Second.
We do need a roll call vote for that. Andy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Letty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so we will go into non-public. Does anybody need a 5-minute break?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll take a break and then we'll go into non-public when we return. Thank you to the public who was here tonight, as always.